Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a Q&A type video, and a question that I get asked occasionally is what kind of lens should I be using? So you're into fire photography, public safety photography, and you want to get a better camera, and now you're looking at all the lens choices and options out there. What do you need? Well, that's what this video is going to be all about. So without any further ado, let's talk about camera lenses.
Battalion 2, engines, 11, 27, 7, and 22. Investigator 1, ladder 27, and safety 1, house fire. CO1 Maple Street, Army, Echo, Battalion 2, engines, 11, and 27.
Hey, thanks for checking out my channel and checking out this video. Just briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with me, I am a public safety photographer or fire photographer in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. I'm actually retired from law enforcement and higher education. And I created this channel a while ago as a place to post some response videos, but I've expanded it recently, and now this channel also includes things like Q&A videos where I address questions that other folks who might be interested in fire photography or public safety photography might have. And then I do some all about videos that are basically all about elements, departments, companies, stations in the Charlotte metro area. So hopefully you'll enjoy the channel. I would ask that you like and subscribe if you do. And then otherwise, let's just get on to today's video. Thanks. Okay, you bought yourself a camera, but the first thing you noticed is no lens comes with the camera. What do you do? Well, the good thing is there's lots of options, lots of things out there that'll work for you. But it depends on how you want to use the camera, what you want to take pictures of. So really in this video, we're just going to do kind of a little primer, if you will, on the lens options available to you and some things you need to know when you're making a decision about purchasing a lens. Okay, so the first thing, and I've mentioned this in other videos, but it bears repeating, lenses are typically dedicated to the camera. They're not necessarily interchangeable. You can't go and buy a Sony camera and put a Nikon lens on it. It won't work properly. There are ways around that. You can buy adapters and things like that. But typically, if you're buying a camera, you typically want to get a lens that is set up or designed to work on that camera. That way all the functions and features will work as they're supposed to. So you have to think about when you're purchasing your camera, and hopefully you did, what kind of lens mount we're talking about and what are your options. So lenses are specific to cameras, and even within a manufacturer, some manufacturers have different lens mount systems, so you do have to be kind of aware of that. The other thing is lenses designed for crop sensor cameras won't always work on a full frame camera and vice versa, so you have to keep that in mind. And that's typically the difference with the manufacturer's mounting system. So full frame camera from one manufacturer might have a specific lens mounting system, and they're typically designated with a letter. And then they may have another lens mounting system for their crop sensor cameras, and that would be a different letter. As you know, I'm kind of a Fujifilm fan, and their cameras are all crop sensors, or their X mount cameras are all crop sensors. They actually make medium format or larger format cameras. Those have a different lens mount. So those you'll see referred to as Fuji's G mount or G series lenses. However, the X cameras all use an X mount lens, and those are all interchangeable. You can use them on any Fuji X mount camera. They won't work on the G series though. However, if you're looking at Nikon, you'll see Nikon has two lens mounting systems. They have an F mount and a Z mount. The F mount is basically their old DSLR camera lens mounting system. The Z mount are lenses designed for their new mirrorless camera systems. All right. In addition to camera manufacturers producing their own lenses, there are several third-party lens manufacturers out there that build really good lenses. The three big ones are Sigma, Tamron, and Tokina lenses. And they're building lenses that will work on the different camera systems. So if you end up buying a Tamron lens for your camera, make sure it has the appropriate mount. Got your Fujifilm, you want to buy a Tamron with an X mount, Fujifilm X mount. If you're using Nikon, then you want to get one with the Z mount. The third-party options are good options. Those are quality lens manufacturers. Certainly, you have nothing to be worried about there. There are certainly lots of other lens manufacturers, some producing good quality lenses, some at a fairly reasonable price, and that's kind of a nice option. So if you're deciding, maybe you want to look at a third-party lens, again, make sure it has the mounting system so it'll work with your camera. And then you can do your homework. There's plenty of great YouTube channels out there where they'll review lenses and tell you about the pluses and minuses and how they work on the different cameras, and take advantage of that. So when you start looking at lenses, there's a couple of specifications or characteristics that you're typically going to see that are used to describe lenses. Probably the most common and important one is going to be the lens length. Lens length is typically measured in millimeters, and it gives you a general idea of the usability or the suitability of the lens for the particular task you're looking at. And just FYI, the lens length doesn't refer to the actual physical length of the lens. However, there is a correlation, and you'll find that longer lenses tend to be bigger lenses. Lens length is actually the measurement from the lens's nodal point to the sensor, or in the old days, to the film plane. And basically, the longer the lens length, the more magnified your field of view is going to be. Conversely, shorter the lens length, you're going to get a much wider angle of view. So in the series of photos I'm showing you now, the longer the lens length, the closer the apparatus is going to appear, the more magnified it's going to be in the photo. Camera lens lengths are often broken down into a couple of basic categories. A lens that is described as a normal or a standard lens is a lens that roughly replicates the field of vision of the human eye. So essentially, when you were looking through your camera's viewfinder, you're seeing roughly the same size image the human eye would see. A standard lens or a normal lens is anything from about 35 millimeters to 50 millimeters. Shorter lenses are called wide-angle lenses, and that's anything under that 35. And those widen the field of vision, and if you get short enough, you actually get kind of that fisheye look. Conversely, longer lenses, anything over 50, are referred to as a telephoto lens. And sometimes you'll see those lens categories broken down further. Sometimes a 50 to 100 you'll see as a short telephoto, or sometimes you'll even see it referred to as a portrait lens. It's a good lens for taking portraits. And then anything beyond 100 millimeters becomes a true telephoto, or in some cases a super telephoto, depending on the lens length. Before moving on, just a quick word about lens length, categories, and crop factor. One of the throwbacks to the film era was a commonly accepted standard for lens length categories. Earlier, I referred to a standard lens or a normal lens as a 50 millimeter lens. That lens length gives you a particular field of view, and as I said, it roughly approximates what a person would see. With full frame cameras, since the sensor size is based on the size of a 35 millimeter negative, those standards or those categories didn't change. However, if you use a crop sensor camera, like a Fujifilm or even a Micro Four Thirds, the smaller sensor size does impact what your image is going to look like or more correctly, what your field of view in your image is going to be. If you're using a crop sensor camera, one of the specifications will be the crop factor. Most of the APS-C cameras are 1.5. Micro Four Thirds actually has a crop factor of 2. What that means is if you wanted to get an equivalent field of view, if you're using a 50 millimeter lens on a crop factor camera and you want to know what the equivalent lens is on a full frame camera, you multiply the 1.5 by 50, and that would tell you that a 75 millimeter lens on a full frame camera would give you the same field of view. Nowadays, that's not nearly as important because all the cameras, what you're viewing in the viewfinder is what you're going to get. So the comparison isn't that important. When we first transitioned to digital cameras, photographers who were using their old film camera lenses sometimes needed to know the crop factor so they would understand or know what to expect with the field of view for their final image. Today, the crop factor is not a very significant specification or factor for most photographers. I kind of believe it is just a term that is kept around just to keep things a little confusing for folks using crop sensor cameras. The second important characteristic or specification of a lens is going to be its aperture. Aperture is typically measured in f-stops, and for lens specifications, they usually list the largest aperture opening the lens can achieve. The f number is actually a ratio of the focal length of the lens to the diameter of the aperture opening. So in this case, you can see it expressed as 1 to 1.4, meaning the focal length is 1.4 times as large as the diameter. Aperture will impact your image quality in a couple of ways. First, the larger the opening, the more light that can get in, allowing you to take pictures in a darker setting and still get good usable images. But aperture also impacts depth of field, or how much of your picture in front and behind the place you focused on is going to be in focus. Lenses that are wide open, that is at a low f number, have a very shallow depth of field. This can be helpful in portrait photography where you're only interested in the subject. Increasing the f number, going to a smaller aperture, will increase the depth of field, making more of your photo in focus. Fortunately, most lenses have an adjustable aperture and can be adjusted anywhere from its largest opening from f1.6 to f2 or f3 to its smallest opening, which is typically f16 or f22. So the 23 millimeter lens shown above has a maximum aperture of f1.4. And from the aperture ring, we can see it can close down to f16. Often you will hear lenses that have a wide aperture referred to as a fast lens, since the wider aperture will allow you to use a faster shutter speed. A slower lens might be a lens that the biggest aperture is an f4 or f5.6, and it's considered slower because you need to use slower shutter speeds to use the lens. One final term you'll hear used about lenses is whether a lens is a prime lens or a zoom lens. The lens shown above is a prime lens in that it has only one focal length. A zoom lens has the ability to adjust or zoom between several focal lengths. Zoom lenses can come in a variety of different zoom categories. For example, a wide-angle zoom might zoom from 10 millimeters to 24 millimeters. A normal zoom or a standard zoom might be between 30 and 70 millimeters. Or you could have a zoom that is a telephoto zoom, zooming from 70 or 80 millimeters all the way out to 500 millimeters. Prime lenses are favored by a lot of photographers because of their simplicity, typically smaller size, and the sharpness of the image you can get from it. Conversely, a zoom lens may give you a little bit more versatility. However, that versatility comes with a trade-off in that the lenses are more complex, and oftentimes there's some compromise that needs to be made to make the lens work over the full range. This can result in a little lower clarity or sharpness in the lens. So when choosing a lens, you will have to decide whether you want to go with a prime lens or a zoom lens. For new photographers, I typically recommend trying out some type of zoom lens. This lens will give you the versatility and allow you to try different focal lengths and sort of see what you like and see how you like taking pictures. I would also remind you that while there may be some decrease in image quality with the more multi-purpose zoom lens, modern zoom lenses still take very good photos and are certainly suitable for most applications that a new or hobbyist photographer would have. So what lens should you get for your first camera? Well, my recommendation is you purchase a kit lens that was designed for your camera of choice. Most manufacturers produce a kit lens. They're relatively inexpensive. You can typically purchase them bundled with your camera and are decent quality, at least to get started. Most kit lenses are about an 18 to 55 millimeter lens with an f3.5 or f4 aperture. This range of focal lengths will provide you with a lot of versatility and meet a lot of your basic photography needs, at least when you get started. Using Fujifilm as an example, because that's what I'm most familiar with, Fujifilm produces several kit lenses. If you're looking to do it as inexpensively as possible, the Fujifilm XC lineup is a good place to start. They make an XC 16 to 50 millimeter and an XC 15 to 45. The XC lenses are Fujifilm's least expensive and probably lowest quality lenses. The majority of Fujifilm lenses are XF series, and those are a step up in quality. Fujifilm does produce several kit lenses in the XF series, including the XF 18 to 55 millimeter, and they also will sell the XF 16 to 80 millimeter as a kit lens. If you think this is a hobby or a pursuit you're going to stay with and get serious about, I would suggest getting the higher quality kit lens, regardless of the manufacturer, in that 18 to 55, 18 to 70 millimeter range as a lens to start with in photography. And certainly whatever lens you ultimately decide on, do some research. You can always go to Google and start out with the basics and search for kit lenses or kit lens reviews and start looking at those. If you know specifically what lens you want to get, again, I would recommend going to Google and checking out some of the reviews for that lens. There are a lot of great online websites that will review them. DP Review is a good one to start with. You'll also see there are a lot of YouTube channels with folks who will do great in-depth reviews of camera lenses. I would suggest watching several of these online reviews to get a general feel for the lens and the quality and the images it'll produce. A quick word of caution, Some of these sites can get very detailed and really into the weeds about the lenses and their performance. At this point, if you're a new photographer, you may not need to be too concerned about this. As you progress in the hobby, those factors or characteristics may become important to you. But right now, we're just looking for a general good quality lens so that you can start taking pictures. The most important first step in becoming a good photographer is getting a camera, getting a lens, and taking photographs. The most important element in taking good photographs is not going to be the camera or the lens. It's going to be you, the photographer. So there you go. There's my quick overview of lenses. Again, like other photography topics, a little cloudy. We use tricky terminology. There are some things you have to keep in mind. Crop center versus full frame changes some of the terminology, if you will. But it's pretty straightforward. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you have a question or there's something I didn't cover or you want to know more about a particular lens, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'd be more than glad to address it in the comments, or maybe it's something we can make into a video in the future. Otherwise, I just thank you for watching. I would ask if you liked it to give it a thumbs up. If you don't already, consider subscribing, and we'll just see you in the next video. Bye.